Josh Anthony. I'm part of Lunacy Entertainment, and we brought our game Dice Tower.
Hi, I'm Rob Stenzinger, and I brought my game Word Turtle Island.
Hi, I'm Alex Brooks-Wieman from Galaxy Games, and I brought Multiplanetary.
Awesome, awesome. Can you guys discuss a little bit of the challenging aspects of game development and how you guys overcome it?
I mean, we just talked about being timely, but so one of the challenges in game development is just figuring out what is fun, which you may think that's surprising, but a lot of times what we think might be fun in our heads as an idea, it might not feel fun when we actually try to code it, or the variant that we thought of isn't fun, and then we have to iterate multiple times and get feedback in order to figure out, okay, how does this actually feel fun to play? That's something that Dice Tower's definitely gone through a lot of iterations to figure out how to make the core concept actually feel fun.
Yeah, I feel that one. For me, I'll pick platform quirks, where surprises, as far as, especially if you're trying to make a game that's meant to go to multiple different marketplaces on different, actual tech, right? So Apple, Google, what have you, PC, Mac. There's always surprises, and sometimes those surprises where it's like, you got to really roll up your sleeves and dig into something that maybe you didn't really plan on, and that's hard for me.
The hardest part of development for me is just, as a level designer, I know the puzzles and the tricks, and so I will never know how hard my level really is.
Yeah. That makes total sense. I feel like when you are so well versed in one aspect of it, you kind of always miss refining it a little bit to be a little bit easier. I know personally, like when I'm building software, when I do unit tests, I don't intend to break them because I know how they work. But then you got QA out there, so that kind of leads into the next question: is a lot of indie development is done through community. So how big of an importance is community for you guys when it comes to either development or even just getting your name out there?
It's important in many ways. Like, for example, you want to have people that are willing to playtest your game, because playtesting is the best source of feedback. There's no substitute. Like, unit tests help catch things and whatnot, but there's no substitute for watching someone play and stumble through all the things you thought were easy, or find those quirky bugs that you just never noticed because you play the game the way it's intended, and they're playing the game the way that they're interpreting it. So community is really important for that, but it's also just important for like getting juice, feeling like, yeah, you're making something that people like, especially when you're deep into something that is really gnarly. It's really helpful to remember that, yeah, there are people that actually enjoy this.
It's how I look at that is like the joy in all of this is connecting with people, and the community is like encouragement, energy, and it's like information to see from other perspectives, and it's also funding, right? So you want to do this as a business, the community is everything, and so connecting with people in a meaningful way, making something you care about in a way that they care about it, like without community, it's nothing.
Yeah, if you're solo like some of us are, the feedback is super important, but also you just need to talk to people about your project or you will lose your mind. And so for that reason, community for me is just like, I just need even just the creature comfort of like, getting the idea outside of my head, like bouncing it off of people. And your work doesn't feel alive until people are engaging with it.
Yeah, no, community is definitely very important. Like, we have a Discord where we have everybody beta testing and giving us bugs, and I spend more time fixing bugs in there than anything. But there's nothing better than like watching somebody have fun playing your game.
Yeah, that's, sorry, that little beat just kind of distracted me for a second. I know personally, I haven't really done too much game development. I'm pretty amateur of the indie development scene. The only game I've really done was a ski-free clone that I demoed at the Multiplanetary with most of these gentlemen up here. And the community feedback I got from that, even just between one day to the next, had me changing so much of the code and everything like that, and putting in new features or even refining other features. With that in mind, when you get that feedback, you have kind of a process of how you're supposed to design it, how you're thinking. Can you guys walk us through your creative processes when it comes to either fixing a mechanic or adding in a new mechanic or adding in a new feature?
Yeah, so the important thing to remember with feedback from other people is their feedback is telling you there's a problem. Sometimes they'll tell you what they think the solution is, but that's not necessarily the right thing to do because they're going based off what they know about your game and what their interests are, which don't necessarily align to what you're actually going for as a designer. So an important part of fixing something is balancing what the feedback is against what you're trying to do and find happy medium to address what the problem is, even if it's not necessarily in the way that was suggested. And there's also a little bit of, you gotta make sure that it's not an ego thing on your end, but it's about finding that balance.
So where discovering a mechanic can happen all over the place. It can happen when you're driving or whatever, like getting feedback from people and like I think what you do with it, like what you learn and what you do with it and when you do something with it can be totally separate things. So learning that, like, oh, there's a different learning style I might want to change my game to address, or I have a new idea for a game. I can't respond to that yet, but I'm just going to capture the idea and I'll deal with it, next game development cycle.
Yeah, we all, we have our different processes for playtesting. For me, I have like the brain trust, like friends who I let see the design first. And for that, I found it was really important to have like a clear designation between alpha testing, so looking for bugs, and then beta testing, where you're maybe getting more design feedback. Because if you get design feedback and there's bugs, people are just going to be distracted by the bugs. So they can't really give good design feedback if that's the case. So especially if your alpha testers and your beta testers are the same people, which I don't necessarily recommend, that's what I do, make sure they know what they're looking for.
Yeah, no, definitely. What my main process for fixing or creating new things is just brute force. I build everything like 5 times until it feels right, and you can't be afraid to scrap it and start again.
Yeah, and kind of speaking on what Adam was saying, a little bit of the brute force, redesigning things over and over again until you feel it's right, and knowing when stuff goes into alpha, or put stuff into alpha, or put a build into beta, or even a release. Game development is really an art, so I feel like personally for me, when I'm designing something, developing something, it's hard to know when those steps are the right steps to take. So when you guys are doing your updates, and you're making your builds, how do you know you're ready for, let's say, an alpha test or beta test or even a release? Because I believe Word Turtle Island the only one up there that's officially released? Or...
Yeah, 12 days ago.
Congrats.
So those steps are very huge and very scary, and I just want to kind of pick your guys' brain about understanding when you feel like your product is ready for the masses or even more people than you've had before.
So I actually want to push a little bit against the idea that this is necessarily a big and challenging thing, because for my development process, what I found is most useful is you want to try and test things frequently so that you can get feedback right away and know whether you need to adjust. As to how much change is justifying another test release for feedback, part of that is kind of what I feel based on where things are, but I also develop particular goals. Like, I'm trying to implement this new feature. What's the minimum amount of work that I need to do to get this feature in the game and playable in a way that I don't have to give a manual to the players to explain how it works. It needs to feel intuitive enough that people can pick it up the way that I'm intending. So that'll obviously vary based on feature, but I try to minimize how much work I do in order to get to that state so that I can get that feedback as soon as I can.
So like when you know when you're ready, it's it's kind of a launch checklist thing. It shouldn't be total magic, but there's going to be up to interpretation things, right? For me, for Word Turtle Island, I had different things I wanted to accomplish at all the stages of, like, before I talked about it publicly with the early prototypes, and then onward. And then for the release, it was like, I super agree that, like, trying to shake out the problems. You don't want to have your blind spots cause problems for, well, customers if you're making a paying game. So how do you work in such a way that you can learn frequently and use what you learn frequently to keep learning? But then there's also to say, like, well, this is a business, I need to stop myself at some point, because the learning's so fun. I could probably work on any game I've made forever. So if there's a point where you say, like, well, this is neat, but not that important, and you can keep moving.
For me, my shorthand is it's ready for alpha when I can't find any more bugs. It's ready for beta when my playtesters can't find any more bugs. And then beta is when I'm like focus grouping. So that's when I see if there's anything in the design that seems confusing or that like really needs improvement before it goes to a wider audience. Once it's done with that, I will continue to fix bugs in the released version, but I am on to the next thing. Like, I'm trying to build a portfolio and not bet the farm on only one game forever, and that's kind of my philosophy.
Yeah, I don't really have any idea how to tell when it's ready because I'm the kind of person where I build a little prototype and I'm ready to release it, and my team is like, absolutely do not put that out. And I'm like, but why?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to what I said earlier. What I said applies mainly for the more focused, dedicated group of testers. If you're talking more about, like, if you're releasing it to a public audience, more broader than that, then yeah, you absolutely want that. It's about how much contact do the people that are playing it have with you. The less contact you have, the more polished it needs to be.
We had a question in the audience.
I was wondering how big your alpha beta group is. Any ideas?
I'd say it's like in the tens for me, but I also take it to playtesting events held by our local IGDA chapter, so that gets us about like a 20-ish pool at those times.
I just checked, around 12 people in the tester channel on our Discord. A few more that aren't in the Discord, but yeah.
For me, it was 3 people. Same people for alpha and beta, and then I sold to a publisher, so they are going to do additional testing on it.
I was testing in public pretty early, but I had like a reliable set of alpha beta testers, about 5 people.
Okay.
But then the few hundred suddenly at an event, right?
So, sorry, let me get to my next question. I have it right now. When it comes to working with the team, because indie developers, you're generally not backed by giant publishers. You're not on massive teams. There are obviously the standout indie developers, like the developers that just made Expedition 33. I think their development team was 20 in total between art, development, sound, etc.
That's internal team members. They have outside.
They did.
Yeah.
So when it comes to building a game, how do you know when you need to actually bring in another person because you don't know how to do something, or you feel like someone else could do it better?
It's a bit of a Venn diagram. What are the skills that I don't have and that would take more time for me to learn than to bring someone else in to do it? And then how much funding do I have available to bring other people in? Because I believe in paying for people to do the work versus asking people to work for free, and that's totally dependent on other people, how people want to do it. That's just the way my philosophy is. So that's the way I look at it. sometimes I'm willing to learn anything, but it'll take me longer to learn how to make good art versus hiring someone that is already good at making art. So it's about finding that right balance of resources versus time spent.
I think that's a very responsible answer, and I like how early on when I started, I just would invite friends with different skills and we would just kind of jam and make stuff. But then, trying to be serious about the business side and wanting to pay people for their work and all that, and not be speculative, then I've taken on more of those roles, and for better or for worse, I'm fascinated by all the things. So I just, try to crawl out from under a mountain with many different hats as often as I can to have a finished enough thing.
It is good to get experience doing all the things so you have all the perspectives in mind when you're directing those. So.
I'm a little freak who does almost everything myself, and it is, the investment in learning a bunch of different skills it's a time investment, but the benefit is, and it works, I think, better if you have a very specific niche. So I developed for the Game Boy, so I am relatively comfortable doing pixel art and music and programming for the Game Boy at this point. And the benefit is you don't have to wait for somebody else. Like, you don't have to be dealing with deadlines and managing people. I know that if I need a new asset, I can sit and devote an hour or two to it and it'll be done. So, big investment, but there is a payoff to doing it that way too.
I am actually very lucky where my team is 3 other guys that I've known since elementary school, and we all just happen, we got a guy that knows art and programming, and a guy that went to college for sound design and music, and then I build the levels and prototype, and then we have a story writer. So it's a great team.
That's awesome. So one thing that Adam mentioned was time allocation. He's able, because he is doing all the stuff on his own, he's able to dedicate an hour to making a new asset. When it comes to devoting time to an indie game, because for most people it's not a full-time job. It's sometimes just a hobby. They want to make it a full-time job. They want to make something marketable. How do you guys get into designing and developing video games to actually get something that you might want to get up to market?
I'm not sure I fully understood the question.
I did ramble it a little bit, I'm sorry. So the question, let me just rephrase it, is it's more based on how, because indie developers, from my experience, have other full-time jobs. So when you're developing a game, you have to do it in your off hours, or your off time. How do you guys go about dedicating that time? Like, do you take a day off from other things, or do you have a day dedicated to working on your projects? Or is it when you can, you get to it?
So funny enough, I have an entire presentation specifically on this subject, which I actually gave earlier on Friday at TutyCon, but I also have it recorded. If anyone's interested, come see me, I can give you my card. But kind of crib from that a little bit, the most important things are you need to have a consistency to do a little bit of something every day at the very least. So at that rate, if you are even just working like an hour a day, that's still 7 hours for a full week. I personally don't work one of the days of the week, so that would be 6. Actually, my own schedule was more like 16 hours a week when I was doing this on this site. Like I said, I've done a whole talk on this, so there's a lot of different things, but consistency is what's really important, and making time on your schedule to always do a little bit of something for however many days of the week you want to do it.
I think my answer is maybe like the hard to hear version, but I have found that it is really hard to make a design good and to get momentum on it unless you're able to devote big chunks of uninterrupted time on it. So for me, I found that while I was doing something else full-time was a good time for me to learn tools. That's a good time to learn languages. But whatever time, and often like the barrier to making a really great design is getting yourself the time and the resources to work on it for a long time in an uninterrupted way. So my breakthrough was like getting to spend a year doing the same design full time. And I was incredibly lucky to be able to do that, but that was what it took for me.
If you don't have the ability to do that, then that's where PTO and weekends are really helpful to also get those chunks of time.
I've worked in both modes, and if it, depending, think of it as your constraints, right? So the scope of your game would definitely be better matched if you have very slight part-time occasional hours. Like, please don't try to do a complex game. It'll be frustrating, and I wouldn't wish that on you, right? I say that to my past self as I say this to you. But then here's the thing that works for me, and it's my own learning style and stuff, is I make it so, and this is as soon as I had kids and I still wanted to do side gigs and creative projects and whatnot. So I have this idea, and I'm sorry to people who whittle, but I think of it as whittling, and I don't know anything about whittling, but I think of it as it's easy to pick up and easy to set down. So I'm like leaving myself like an easy bookmark to always come back to design or art or something, so that the cost of coming to my desk, I can be productive in like 60 seconds, as opposed to going like wandering around in my head and like, what was I doing? That has helped me a lot for a lot of different side creative things, including making games.
Yeah, no, I go to work full time and then come home, spend some time with my family, and then once everybody goes to bed, I just spend an unhealthy amount of time awake at 3 in the morning developing.
You're young and lucky.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add my 2 cents because I have a different philosophy. What I do is I do a lot of game jams. Every game that I published on Steam came from a game jam, and the reason for that is because game jams allow me to take the design up to like 80% of completion, and then it's just about finishing it off. And it only takes a week or 2 for the game jam, right? But then it's 3 or 4 months of doing that last 20%. And so that I confirm that I want to make this game during the game jam. I get the players' responses, I see how it fares, and then I know which game I'm going to spend the next 3 or 4 months actually developing.
Yep. Dice Tower was a game jam game.
Yeah.
That kind of leads into the next question, especially with like game jams. We just had one at 2DCon where the theme was retro. How, during a game jam, that's kind of like you're getting a theme, you're getting potentially assets and stuff to work with, but you're kind of building something from the ground up, but it's inspired by something else. So what are some games that have inspired you guys for some of the games that you've made?
Oof. That's always tough because I'm someone that enjoys a wide variety of games, so it's hard to narrow down which are inspirations without getting into way too long of a ramble. So I'll just pick one of my random inspirations and say Halo. So I love playing the original Halo especially, but part of what Halo does from a strategic standpoint is you only get to carry 2 weapons at a time. So a huge part of that gameplay is picking which weapons you are using and basing that on whatever it is you're encountering on the battlefield, but also those weapons have limited ammunition, so sometimes you can't take your best option because you're out of ammo for it. So there's all kinds of strategic interplay mixed in with this heavy action. Dice Tower has a lot of DNA from that, where you have to collect dice and you roll those dice for many different strategic reasons, but you can only roll the dice that you currently have, so you have to be strategic about which ones are you picking and what are you using them for.
There's so many games I'm inspired by, but then specifically for Word Turtle Island, I wanted to have fun typing, and Typing of the Dead was a big one, even though like I have barely touched the Dreamcast version. But then there's Zombies Ate My Neighbors, so it's kind of like there's pieces from both. And one thing I like about Zombies Ate My Neighbors is that it's fun to rescue those, the folks that are in the middle of battle, they can't do anything, you help them. But then I am not awesome at that game, but I still like it, and I think that that's a signal where I'm like, so I just try to listen to the just different inspirations and say, what if I could somehow put this into my game where you don't have to be awesome at it, but still have fun.
steal ideas.
I love that game. The design influences for like my design specifically are like Gen 2 Pokemon, Earthbound, Mother 3, and then Paper Mario. But the breakthrough influences that actually made me want to make this, Undertale got huge. It was made in Game Maker, and that like is what gave me the confidence to try to do something even though I didn't have a coding background. Then I used GB Studio. And in 2019, when GB Studio came out, I was not seeing anything made there that gave me the confidence that like you could really do a design that would work. And then a creator named Louis Zong, who is like an animator and a musician, came out with a GB Studio game. It's like a platformer that's like 3 levels, but he's an artist. So that was right after GB Studio started being able to do color. And the art style was like so unique. I like picked it up and it was charming and it felt great. And I was like, okay, I gotta try this tool set because you can really do something with it. So those were breakthrough influences for me.
When I'm designing, I grew up on the PS2 games and just played all of those. So any Ratchet and Clank, Jack and Daxter, Sly Cooper era games, I just try and be like the modern versions of those.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, and I do when I'm designing things as well. Granted, again, I'm not the best game developer, but when I'm building out software, I do take influences from other systems that are out there that have been in existence. You know, they're out there for a reason, and they're popular for a reason. They work. So there are mechanics in games that are not the forefront, which is kind of like someone's interpretation of something. So while most games have, let's say, the Nemesis system from Shadows of Mordor, or it's another throwback, the artifact power system from World of Warcraft. There are a lot of games that have a forefront mechanic that is kind of the marketing pitch. But there are also very fun mechanics that people don't know about. Or they know about them, but it just kind of is, it just happens. It's computer magic. But it takes a lot of time to code those. Are there any things in your games that are kind of like that computer magic that people might take for granted, but you're very proud of that system that you made?
There's plenty of those, but I'll stick to just talking about one. So in Dice Tower, part of its loop is that you get maps so that you can see which rooms are coming up and you plan how you're going to get to their exit in the time that you roll. One of the ways that you plan is you use map markers. You can place a map marker, it'll then show you in the game world where you need to go in order to get to where you placed that marker. It sounds fairly simple when I describe it, but in order to implement it, I first have to provide a way to know where in the map world is being targeted, because the map coordinates are not the same as the room coordinates, the platforming coordinates, so I have to translate between those two. I then have to create a physical entity that then appears in the game world where the marker is going to be represented, which then also gets translated back to show on the map. And then there also needs to be a way to render that marker. There's also an entirely separate UI that points to where that marker is. So just that simple, place a marker and go to it, there's a whole bunch of systems underneath that support making that experience work.
This is hard to pick, but like how in Word Turtle Island, I've got like there's themes for the words. You don't have to think about why is this word on the screen, but like every word is on the screen for a reason because it's part of like the theme that came up, and that includes like rhyming. And my not secret hope is that someone finds 2 odd words that rhyme and writes poetry about it or does something. So like it's kind of like I want to inspire creativity through that. Just this seeing 2 different words in a similar place.
Gumball and Trick or Treat Land is for the Game Boy, and the Game Boy is not very powerful, so I have to do a lot of workarounds for menu screens and things like that. So each time it cuts to a new screen, that challenge sort of gave me the opportunity to like illustrate a new background. So when you're selecting a spell, like a spell book shows up, and you're selecting from that menu. And that was something, it was just my way of like getting around a technical limitation, but as it turns out, sometimes those are the things that people engage with design-wise. So yeah, that's been fun.
Yeah, so in a lot of our earlier builds, we had it more third-person shooter style where you actually have to like precisely aim. And we noticed a lot of people had trouble with it. And so our programmer did a very cool auto aim system where it displays a target over the enemy selected. And I have no idea how it works, but it is very fun now that it is in the build, and it's the computer magic you're talking about.
Yeah, and I always say computer magic because sometimes when I'm like trying to discuss what a software does to a prospective buyer or even just a business owner, which is the term for product owner or whatever that is, running or being the manager of the project you're working on, it's difficult to translate like, well, you might want something that sounds easy, but on the back end, it's completely like, for lack of a better term, a shit show.
Accurate.
And just trying to get that understanding and communication out has always been a tough thing to do. But also when you're doing those kind of complex things that people take for granted, people just look at it and they're like, oh, this is cool. And I know for me, that kind of discourages me from continuing coding because like I put a lot of work into that. So I get into little design runs. And I'm just wondering if you get, when you guys, if you do get into design runs, what are some ways that you guys kind of break yourself out of it? Do you go to a different part of the project and start working on that or trying to get inspiration? Or you just kind of take a step back and reflect on what it is you're trying to do and kind of articulate it a little bit, like a little rubber ducky style kind of approach?
It's kind of a mix of those things, various different approaches. If I find myself getting stuck on something, if I don't immediately have to get it into the game, I like to just step away from that particular thing, work on something else, let my subconscious ruminate on it. If I need to be a little bit more active in designing that thing, like that's the thing that I need to get in tonight, then I'll still step away, but instead of working on other things, I'll try to do things like take a walk, let my brain ruminate kind of a little bit more intentionally on that. And then for those kind of situations, what I find really helpful is write down a question and then try to answer the question. And in the process of answering, that usually helps turn the gears because it's easier to think of an answer to a question than to think of some nebulous concept.
Yeah, I like the question prompt kind of thing. For me, it's if I'm really kind of stuck, I will I'll do free writing, and something's gonna fall out of my brain, and it's gonna be like, oh, that's what I need to start, thinking about more, or and it still could be like, I don't know, just feeling burned out or tired or whatnot, or it could be like that I don't want to do this current task, but if there is something actually that I'm ready to do, that I'll do that instead. Like I can pause that and work on music for a bit or something like that. So, but I can find it, and it just lets me see what's in the chaos in my brain, just dumping it out.
Yeah, I personally struggle less with ideas and more with execution. So the way that I sort of, I don't know, parent myself while I'm developing is once I have fixed the thing that I am really like dragging myself through for the day, then as like a little treat, I can like, okay, once I've done that, I can design a new character, I can write a new song, I can do something that's gonna like fill me up creatively a little bit more. That's helpful for me.
Yeah, no, it's definitely very helpful as an indie that the whole project is your job, not one specific part like it would be in a large studio. So you can, I'm having problems here, so I'm gonna hop here. And that definitely helps the process a lot. But it can also mess it up because then you're jumping all over the place doing everything.
Yeah, I know when designing software, if I have to wear too many hats, I kind of neglect some things for other things. And like I might focus on one side of the project as opposed to like, oh, I can just get this up and running. It's not optimized whatsoever, but it works. let's push that out and let's work on the thing I want to work on. So how do you guys decide, or even just kind of, I guess the term I'm looking for is prioritize things. Like, even if you're not excited to work on a piece of the project, it has to get done. How do you guys prioritize and like motivate yourself to do the things that you don't want to do?
So the first question to ask around that is, what is the end goal? So for me, I'm trying to release a game commercially. Then I need to answer the questions of, well, what does that entail? What's required in order to have a commercial release? So from there, I can at least start with a list of, this is what I'm working towards, and then start breaking each of those things down further and further until I have at least enough defined that it feels doable to work on. Maybe not enjoyable, but it feels doable because it's broken down enough that I can hold the concept of whatever it is in my head and long enough in order to just get it done. So not necessarily fun, but breaking things into smaller chunks makes it feel more manageable, and then once you start knocking all of those out, it feels even better.
I heard the word enough a couple times. That is a really powerful tool in my opinion, where
Yeah.
I could define something and lose myself in the definition forever. Whereas if I start to create a threshold and say like, well, when is this enough? Like, do I have enough of a plan for the leveling system? Do I have enough of a plan for like facilitating the experience of starting in the middle and the end of a level and whatever? Whenever it's enough, then I'm like, okay, now I can build that thing. And then the motivation is, that's a judgment call, the enough thing. It's like, do I have more questions than answers, and can I start? And that kind of stuff is like how I think of enough. And then the motivation thing, I think practice is important because there's a mechanics of it to just show up to the project. It's a long-term commitment, even if it is weeks or months. It's still a recurring thing to show up to. And so motivation matters, but I try to I like the parent myself thing too, where it's like, if I truly have a task I don't want to do, but I know I need to do it, I'm like, I'm making a game, can't this be fun? What's my problem? I'll think like, well, what's my victory, like, like donut or celebration or dance or something, you know?
Yeah, consistency is better than motivation many times, precisely for that reason.
I was talking to some minis about this last night. A lot of us use some kind of ticketing system, so like Kanban, Agile, Scrum, post-it notes on a wall, you know, and it helps to have a plot like Jira or Trello are like good places to start. And even I developed by myself, and I still find that dividing stuff up into tickets helps give me a sense of progress and gives me a sense of like, here is what I like really need to prioritize before I can like let up and do the thing that is more fun. So
It's nice because you can actually sort it to the top.
yes.
Yes.
But breaking them out into tickets, it doesn't feel as overwhelming because like you're thinking, you're like, I gotta build this game, I've gotta build this system, I gotta build this system, this. But when you break it out into tickets, you're like, okay, well this system needs this. They're each individual tickets. Oh, well, the physics system needs to have the gravity tweaked a little bit. Okay, got that fixed. Okay, well now the physics system is the collisions are just a little bit off. But when you're thinking about it as a whole, it's like, I need to update the physics system.
Yeah, momentum.
Yeah, exactly.
Once one ticket goes down, it feels like the next ticket's going to be easier.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, the tickets are definitely very helpful. We use a good old checklist in the Discord that we copy paste and send with the new check every time. It's not efficient, but the motivation is definitely that at the end of the day you will have made a game, and that's awesome.
So kind of pivot a little bit to tools and resources that you guys use. There, especially with indie developing right now, there's a breadth of different options you have. You've got Unreal, you've got Unity, you've got Godot, you've got Game Maker Studio. There are different art things that you can use, like Sprite from Steam, and just Photoshop, whatever the one on iPad is, Procreate or something like that. What tools have you guys found work the best for you when developing?
So really depends on what particular thing is being done. First, I want to say, just take whatever is working for you right now, start with that, and then as you learn where the pain points are, find the tools that address those pain points. So for us, one of the pain points we were having was how do we keep track of all of the features and bugs in the game? So we started trying out various softwares around tracking those kind of things, and we ultimately settled on using Notion, because what Notion also gave us was a way to keep track of game design documentation, and it was a lot easier to keep all of that in one place. But we didn't necessarily start with just use Notion for all the things. We got there as we found where our pain points were.
Yeah, I think it's good because you can really get lost. I could get lost in shopping for tools, and I like the metaphor of if I'm really trying to figure out, like right at the beginning of the development cycle for Word Turtle Island, I wasn't sure what engine I was going to use. I was pretty sure I didn't want to reuse, even though I like Solar 2D, it's not what I wanted to go forward with because that's what I used for a different game. But so here I was like, well, so it's almost like what restaurant makes the food that you like and kind of what do they use and does it seem approachable? And so I kind of looked around and saw Godot and it hit my checklist better than Unity, so I started with that, right? So I had the pain point I wanted to change, but then just looking for that realistic of like what seems like I can make progress doing that, and then you may or may not, and then you can respond to that and pivot.
We're lucky to live in a time when there's so much great like free and open source stuff to use out there. That's like everything I use. So I develop in GB Studio, pixel art in Piscal, I do all my music in OpenMPT, and then I assemble maps in Tiled. And it's great. I love all those tools.
Yeah, no, we just use Unity for the development. We're on the newest version of Unity, and then we use Blender for the modeling, and just keep it basic because there's lots of tutorials for Unity if you ever need anything looked up. Like I was making a part where the boxes break in my game, and I had to spend like 6 hours researching every article about it, and I like that Unity has the tutorials.
Yeah.
To finish which game engine is what, Dice Tower's on Godot.
Same here for Word Turtle Island, but the community was a good sign to be like, oh, I'm not alone. I can
Yeah, Stack Overflow was everyone's friend, essentially. I always made the joke at my first job that when I was building software, my job title was Google Query Expert, because I didn't know what I was doing, but if you know what you're looking for, other people have experienced the exact same things that you have gone through and can give you a little bit of guidance and stuff with the tools that you have, or tools might point you to a new tool that you never knew about, and you're like, oh, that solves literally the issue I was looking for, and now I don't have to spend 4 hours coding my own solution to it. So just going off that, looking at the time, I do want to open it up to the audience to ask questions to the developers up here. So we'll go ahead and start an open Q&A session. Does anyone have any questions?
Real quick, I just want to say that for pixel art style 3D models, I really like Blockbench. It was made for modding Minecraft, and it's actually just really nice.
Yep.
Any recommendation for like an art style, either 2D or 3D, for someone who has no experience making art?
Start with 2D because 3D involves a whole different set of skills. You're not just making and creating images, you're creating textures, you're creating 3D models, you're rigging the models. So if it's purely what gets you creating things fastest, it's 2D. Otherwise, it's if you really want to make a 3D game and you're willing to invest more time in learning it, then go for it. So it's a measure of what are your interests and how quickly do you really want to start producing things.
I know for me, when I was learning, I started with Unity, and then the whole Unity thing of like, you need to subscribe to it, and I was like, okay, that turned me off. I went to Unreal, and I was like, I love Unreal, this is great. I hate 3D modeling though. It is way too difficult for me because I have this image in my head, but I don't necessarily have the hand dexterity to make the model happen. And even make the animations for it, sometimes they can get super janky. Like, I think, what was a good recent example of just an arm clipping through itself and just spinning constantly? Like, just little things like that make it difficult to do 3D modeling. So for me, when I looked at tools to make a game, I'm like, okay, 2D, what's a good 2D engine? Unreal, unfortunately, is not. Like, you can make 2D games, but it's all designed really for 3D. But Godot itself is very, very gracious to 2D, and 2D development, or just 2D art, is so much easier to make than a 3D specific thing, because you're just working with a hitbox instead. You're not working with the skeleton. You're not working with different three-dimensional objects on different parts of a body.
Right, because there's the creating the art and that asset, but then also making it interactive in the context of the game. Different steps, but I think make a lot of art and then see where you go, because I assumed Virtual Island was going to be pixel art, and I was like, I just draw cartoonish really fast and comfort, because that's what I practiced for a long time. So I was like, well, guess I'm not doing pixel art. So.
Yeah, I love pixel art. I do pixel art. Not every indie game has to be pixel art. And the games that are pixel art for no reason are, to me, feel different than games that have some intentionality with their style. I think that's what a lot of us strive for if we're doing pixel art. Getting started, I recommend pick an era, like a platform that you love, and look at like what the actual specs are. Because what really helped me starting out is like, okay, I'm gonna start out, every sprite is 16 pixels by 16 pixels. And that like gives you enough of a constraint to work in that you can start getting the semblance of a unified style. The other thing is, if you wanna make visual assets like map tiles, like background things, try to make them tileable. So when you like draw your first house, try to make it so that you, the tiles are like puzzle pieces. So you don't want to make a house and then just stamp it a bunch of times. Make a house that you can make a long version and a tall version of the same house, and then that's going to give you a lot more mileage in the different kind of maps that you can create.
Yeah, no, as a beginner, my best advice would be to make figure out what you want to make, like what you like, and then just depending on how complicated it is, you're gonna have to learn more. Like, if you want to do 3D, maybe you could start with low poly, and then slowly start increasing the detail level. Or it all depends on what you want to make, though, but it's how much you're willing to learn.
So, something I just want to real quick add regarding AI, because that's a thing these days. Setting aside the ethical concerns with AI, which are totally legit to have, one thing about AI is, sure, you can use it to generate things and come up with stuff that you don't have the skill set to do, but you still need to have the skill set to understand where AI is getting it wrong, whether that's doing art, whether that's doing code. If you don't understand what it's putting out, you're not going to be able to tell when AI is getting it wrong, and AI definitely gets it wrong a lot.
I also wanted to answer the question, just because a lot of games that people want to make can't fit into the 2D style, right? Like somebody wants to make a first-person shooter. However, there are ways that you can use 2D art to make 3D games, and I think that's also very viable.
Yep,
So,
billboarding.
Billboarding, exactly. Basically going Doom for first-person shooter.
Doom style, Duke Nukem.
That's actually coming in vogue lately. So
It is. I've been noticing a lot of games that are doing that. Is going back to that like really hyper fast first-person shooter, pixel art style of billboarding and stuff. It's really fun to see that come back too. And it's fun to watch trends from when I was growing up come back, and people taking new inspirations and new ideas from it. Like, I think the best idea, or the best game recently, was probably Undertale, where it's incredibly a minimalistic game. Like, barely anything on the screen at any given time. The art is very, I will say it's great, but it is very elementary based art. Like, anyone could, if anyone given the time, could recreate it. Not probably as well, but there was a lot of games growing up that were essentially the same thing, but they were all done in binary, and they were all done in like assembly code. So seeing modern takes on old styles is always a really cool thing too. Are there any other questions? I do have one last question, and that it kind of does come back to the AI question. AI, huge contentious topic. There are a lot of tools out there that'll give you what you want really quickly. It's like you said, you need to know what you're looking for in order to fix it, because AI, it's coded to interpret. It's not coded to do it right. So there are a lot of tools out there, like I know if you're using Unity and Unity and like Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio or Unreal and Rider, there's like GitHub Copilot or even JetBrains has their own AI system. What do you guys, outside of the ethical art side, what are your guys' opinions on AI to generate boilerplate code?
So the thing about AI is the entire principle of how it works is it takes stuff that already exists and amalgamates it into a medium, which is also the same thing that people do when you're doing searches online. You're looking up different sources and amalgamating it into a medium. So what it's not going to give you is something that's original. It's not only going to be able to create from stuff that already exists. So if you're trying to come up with anything unique or that isn't commonplace, it's not going to do well there. So boilerplate, it's really mainly just useful for creating very basic stuff that lots of people have already created and that it may be tedious. For the things that I'm doing, a lot of what I'm doing is not that, so I've not really found AI to be that useful.
Yeah, the short answer is I don't think there is one. So AI is meaningful to lots of people, right? And they're finding great use of it. It's helping them get to places where they want to get. I don't personally find it providing a path for me, but then again, I try to question that. So in poking and exploring, I actually started making a workshop on creating with and without AI, right? Just to argue with myself about the whole thing. And then I tabled it because I'm like, I don't know if I can. I have such mixed feelings on it. And but at the same time, if it's a tool, whatever helps people learn and move forward and find your own voice and then use your own human understanding for whatever level it is, it's valid and awesome and people want it and they want to connect with how you feel and see the world, not how the AI did. But if you use it to get somewhere so you can move forward,
I think that products made with AI are fundamentally just qualitatively different from handmade ones. And like the analogy I would draw is like, you know, as good as a Big Mac or like Kraft mac and cheese get, you know, like industrialized manufactured food, and I love those foods. You can always tell the difference between that and a home cooked meal or like a farm to table experience. And there's always going to be a market for the thing that is more handmade. And I think people can tell in the final product. So as a general statement, that's where I land.
I do like that. I never actually thought about that. Like AI, in at least the software world, is very, every product needs AI, but it doesn't. It's like you said, there's a market for the handmade. There's a market for the actual person who dedicated the time to learn the craft and build something that has, I would like to say, meaning instead of just building it for the sake of building it.
Well, I mean, or even if any human's taking any shortcut, they're doing that based on what their own perspective and feelings and ideas and memories and stuff, as opposed to a big cloud of querying a collective thing. Mm-hmm. It's got your idiosyncratic voice in it, even if it's simple.
Yeah, no, like I wouldn't want to use AI for anything like artistic related, like draw me a sprite, make me a model. But I've found it's very useful for, I've been stuck on this bug for an hour. Hey, can you find a syntax error in here? I can't. Or, you know, getting a general idea of what to do. Like, hey, I need this AI. And it gives me a general concept of like, you could try this. But I try not to use it ever outside of, I did a little bit in the very prototyping stages, but since the team has been together, we haven't used any.
Yeah, and I think that's another good point about AI, is that it is, I always try to tell business owners, when they're like, we need AI in our product. I'm like, no, you don't. It's a tool in the tool chest. It is not product in itself. If you make it the product itself, you lose your identity to it. Oh, you got a question?
More of a comment. I know there's some interesting legalities with AI, like notably, like a prompt generated AI image can't be copyrighted. So if you need to maintain creative control of your work, that would be a good reason not to use AI.
Yeah, and that's very much in line with why I also avoid using AI, because a lot of places that offer AI services, they did not source their data ethically, and even if the tool itself helps me with certain things, and AI as a tool does help with like generating ideas and stuff, I just have an issue using something that I can't tell whether they were considerate of the people that provided the data.
I've tried making assets with AI, using AI image generation, and I can tell you, as somebody with an idea in their head or a vision, it is a pain in the butt to try and get the AI to get anywhere close to what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Because you have to have such a specific prompt for all of these things that you want, and then does one thing a little bit different, and if you're not going to go into Photoshop and edit yourself, then what are you going to do? Just ask it for 10 more copies and maybe you get it right. It's huge. It's a lot of effort.
It's literally micromanagement.
It is.
It is, and it's like you said. Like, are you going to make it another 10 times? Because every time you give the same prompt, you're not going to get the same object back or the same art. I know I saw this websites you should know about tool for game development. One of them was a AI 3D model generator. You just give it a prompt, and all of a sudden you get a 3D model. I was like, oh, maybe I'll try this out for this Unreal game I'm making. I can tell you without a shadow of doubt, they were the most ugly, grotesque, terribly rendered 3D models, and every time I press it, that's not what I'm looking for, that's not what I'm looking for, that's not what I'm looking for. And they're just all blurry. It's just, AI is a great tool to have. I think the best way to utilize AI is, like you guys were saying, use it like a chatbot. Use it to like kind of reference your ideas. That's what I use personally AI for the most is getting, like, I'm stuck on an idea and I'm like, okay, well, how do I write this for loop again? Just simple things like that. It's like, I should know how to do this, but for some reason, my brain is just farting right now. So using AI in that sense is fun.
So I have 9 years of programming experience in corporate software, and I use AI at this moment for my latest video game I'm working on to do code in a way that I would be a senior developer telling a junior developer what I want them to make. And so I tell them, I want this class, I want this hierarchy, I want this command structure, I want this design pattern, and then it's able to follow that pretty decently.
Yeah, and it looks like you said you're a senior developer telling a junior developer what they want.
Yeah.
That's another great way to look at it. Is AI is a learning system. It's trying to get better itself through iterations. So if you're giving it stronger prompts, you're going to get better results out of it. But also, you got to go in and tweak it too, because it might not be exactly what you're looking for, but it is there. It is that good boilerplate.
One of the issues I end up having is if something isn't working how I expected, I then have to do a deep dive into reviewing what has been created. And I don't always, when I generate, have the interest of reading everything that I've generated. And that's a very strong pitfall.
Yeah.
But just to, as far as I'm nodding along and stuff, I see the potential as far as learning through it, with it, but then there's always the path of make something simpler. Try to, like, put all your code in one file. Have fun. You know what I mean? Just make methods that call methods. Don't worry about structuring can help you with future maintenance and extension and all that stuff. Totally cool. But like, you can dodge it by just making something simpler too.
If we're okay with completely changing the subject.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
If you could go back to when you just started, what advice would you give yourself? And no matter how specific.
So, Dice Tower is my first commercial effort. If I could go back to when I started the project, I would actually tell myself to not make Dice Tower the first commercial project, because through 3 years that it's been in development, the idea that it started with was way more complicated to execute than I thought it would be. And it turns out when you're trying to take a platformer and mesh it with strategy, those are very different paradigms. And for someone with my level of experience, it's taking me way longer to stumble my way through that and find good working solutions. And I agree with a lot of advice that's given is start making small games and making games quickly. The process that I took did not really allow me to do that. So that's why I would tell myself, don't start with Dice Tower if I had the chance to do that.
Fail fast.
Yes.
Fail fast, fail often. You get more growth from failure. If I were to go back and tell myself, I would pretty much do the same thing, like don't make something too complex. My biggest pitfall for me when I'm developing either designing a new software or a new system or even designing a game is I want it to be perfect right out of the game. So I want all the art assets done perfectly. I want all the code to be working perfectly and flawlessly. Yeah, there'll be bugs, but that's my biggest pitfall. And I think if I were to go back, I'd be like, just use a box. Like, just make a square and say that's what it is. And then go back and change it later. It's an asset. You can just swap it out. Just make it the same size and you're good. You don't need to have a moving sprite. You don't need to have a dynamic like sprite sheet for your initial game. You can just use shapes.
I would say don't skip around. Don't work on chapter 2 until chapter 1's done. Like, you create more problems for yourself doing that, I found personally. A lot of the running in circles I did in development is because I didn't finish something before I moved on to the next area. So I would tell myself that.
I mean, so if I time traveled 30 years back to when I started doing this, I would, after I stopped hugging myself and crying, I would say, please, yeah, build something simple and don't quit. Keep at it. It's okay if it's difficult or confusing, or if it doesn't click with people right away. Build another thing and keep going, because what you're really doing is building your entire future by being an intentional artist who doesn't give up.
Yeah, I would tell myself, don't be afraid to just throw a project away if it doesn't feel like it's working. Like, you don't have to go in and fix it, especially if you've never shown it publicly.
Yeah, like, that's another thing is like, you've got this idea, you're building it out, and it just isn't working. There's no reason to beat your head against the wall on something that just doesn't work or isn't what the vision just is not connecting with what you're developing or designing. There's no point in just keep trying to fix it with duct tape or like try to hodgepodge it together to get a product. Scrap it, move on to something else. Maybe you can take inspiration from what you did before with some of the systems and stuff and put it into a new game. Like, I think a good example of that is the PlayStation 2 Lord of the Rings games. Great games. Some of my favorite childhood memories is playing those games. I found out recently that they were trying to build out their own engine, and it took them 2 years to design this engine. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait, what is the engine that PGA Tour is using? Because they just have a start point and an end point, right? So they rebuilt the Lord of the Rings game using the same engine that Tiger Woods PGA Tour is on, and just swapped out the assets because it was a lot easier to do. Like, there's no reason to brute force, not brute force, but there's no reason to keep working on something that just isn't getting there. You can always take what you've done and move it and inspire and use it as inspiration for another project.
To be fair, golf is canonically in Lord of the Rings.
But I believe that is the time that we have. Do we want to ask one or answer one more question from the audience and then wrap up, or are we doing James?
We might have a guest coming here shortly, so.
Okay. I will say that concludes the panel then. Thank you all so much for